The disrespect for the Tennessee Titans and Will Levis is at an all-time high. I'll tell you why I'm fed up on today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast.
You are Locked On Titans, your daily Tennessee Titans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Titans podcast. I am your host, Tyler Rowland. Titans fans, today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit I have a competitive side, and it is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. Join your friends and download Monopoly Go now free on the App Store or Google Play. The disrespect for the Tennessee Titans and Will Levis in particular is at an all-time high, and I am sick of it. We're going to dive into some way too early 2025 NFL mock drafts, and I'll tell you why I'm just absolutely at my wit's end with the way the Titans and Will Levis are being portrayed right now. Before we dive into it, thank you for making the Locked On Titans podcast your first to listen each and every day. Remember, Monday through Friday, Tennessee Titans content all year round, always for free. You're not going to beat that anywhere else. Make sure you get subscribed, stay subscribed to the number one Tennessee Titans podcast in the world. I want to give a big time shout out to all of you who tune into the Locked On Titans podcast, folks on YouTube, folks on the podcast feeds, over 150,000 views and downloads over the draft week. Cannot thank you all enough for that. I got so excited. I knocked over my water right there. Cannot believe all the love and support. I know I took a lot of heat for some of my draft takes, so seeing you guys all come out and show out, I can't appreciate you enough. So I wanted to give a big thank you to everybody out there for the numbers that we put up during the draft. But with that being said, one more mock draft Monday. And we're going to look at some early, way too early, in my opinion, 2025 mock drafts. And we got to start with one from The Athletic. Look, Dane Brugler is one of my favorite draft analysts, and he says here on The Athletic that he's going by Super Bowl odds, not how he thinks the teams will finish. But he has the Tennessee Titans picking second in the draft next year. Second pick. And with that second pick, the Titans draft Carson Beck, the quarterback out of Georgia. Brugler says this, quote, "If the Titans are drafting this high next April, the organization might be re-examining its quarterback situation. In his first year as a starter, Beck got consistently better with each performance and put some beautiful throws on tape. He enters the season as the quarterback scouts like the most." Why in the world would I draft Carson Beck in the third year of Will Levis? Why would I do that? Next year's quarterback class, as things stand right now, is absolutely putrid, okay? I do not want Carson Beck. I do not want Shooter Sanders. I do not want Quinn Ewers. No. None of these dudes make more sense than letting Will Levis play in year 3. It's just absolutely absurd to think about that. And there are just two layers of disrespect here at the end of the day. Number one is for Will Levis as a player. And that is something that is really what I'm focusing on right here, is the absolute disrespect for Will Levis as a player that's been going on this offseason. I mean, we advertise here with FanDuel, and shout out to FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, but they got Will Levis ranked behind Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr. as quarterbacks next year. I mean, come on. Look back at what Will Levis was able to do. Look at the 4-touchdown debut against Atlanta. Look at the ability to come back in Miami, the miracle in Miami. Look at the things that he was able to do last year with what he had around him. An offense that had scored 17 points in the last 2 seasons, obviously was not coached properly on the offensive side of the ball. The worst offensive line in the entire league, maybe you want to say the Giants or the Commanders had worse, but it's a bottom 3 offensive line with 2 good players, right? Daniel Brunskill was good until his body broke down at the end of the year. Peter Skoronski was good, but had midseason appendectomy. So he clearly wasn't his 100% best. And if you look at Peter Skoronski now, pretty clear how he was affected last year. He's a monster now. Look at his arms. Look at his width. Look at his girth. I mean, he just looks huge compared to last year. So obviously in his rookie year as a rookie offensive lineman with the worst pass blocking center in the NFL and Aaron Brewer and the worst pass blocking left tackle spot in the NFL, no matter who you wanted in there, Duncan, Dillard, NPF, garbage. The worst left tackle spot in the NFL 2 years running. But I'm just focused on Will Levis. So with Will Levis behind a bottom 3 offensive line with the worst pass blocking center starting in the NFL and the worst pass blocking left tackle spot in the NFL, still had incredible moments and incredible flashes. Had some great throws in that late game against Pittsburgh. I know the interception ended the game, but he's trying to force it with no time left. Like, to see what we saw from Will Levis last year in the situation that he was in, and I've just talked about the offensive line and the offensive coaching. Haven't even mentioned the fact that, other than DeAndre Hopkins, who do the Titans have at wide receiver? I mean, NWI was wide receiver too. A guy who was the Titans' 5th or 6th wide receiver right now. NWI, I admit, I take shots at NWI all the time. He probably is overhated at the end of the day. He's a solid depth role player who could be wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5, something like that. But he was wide receiver 2. And then you have the ghost of Traylon Burks out there supposed to be something. And then Kyle Phillips, they finally get on the same page. Mike Vrabel takes him out of the roster equation. And then he's hurt other times and inconsistent other times. So one of the bottom 3 wide receiver groups in the entire NFL. One of the bottom 3 offensive lines in the entire NFL. Bottom half of the NFL offensive coaching. Yeah, I think Tim Kelly is an okay play caller. But what about the offensive line coaches? What about the tight end coaching? What about the running back? What about the entire coaching staff and their philosophy on offense? So all of that, bottom 3 offensive line, bottom 3 wide receiver group, bottom half of the league offensive coaching in your rookie season, all of that and the flashes that Will Levis showed us isn't good enough to be ranked ahead of Bo Nix and Michael Penix. What are we doing here? So not only is it insane, in my opinion, to have the Titans ranked 2nd, which I'm going to talk about that more at the end of the show, that these Super Bowl odds that have the Tennessee Titans picking top 2. What are we doing here? I don't think the Titans win the Super Bowl this year, but the 2nd least likely team with all the moves. I mean, we're going to talk about that at the end of the show, but the pure disrespect for Will Levis, who has the most hero throws in the NFL from the time that he started, which are throws where the window is very, very small and he's able to fit it in. Like, we're talking about a guy that dragged this team to the success that they had when they had it with nothing around him. And you think that even if the Titans have a poor season, it's going to be Will Levis's fault? Right now, Nicholas Petit-Ferrer is still set to be a starter. Traylon Burks or Kyle Phillips is still set to be a starter. This team needs a ton of help on defense. If the Titans are that bad, it's not going to be Will Levis's fault. And I definitely don't want Carson Beck or Sadhu Shander or freaking Quinn Ewers. Like, why am I taking any of these quarterbacks thinking it's an upgrade on Will Levis? Just insanity. Just disrespect to the max. I think it's absurd. Absolutely absurd. But we're going to talk about some picks that do make sense for the Tennessee Titans before we do that. Do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Look, it's winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL. Playoffs, baby. Playoffs. And FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 that you can bet on spreads, money lines, player props, who's going to win each series. There's so much stuff on there. And remember, baseball is in full swing right now too. Make sure that you visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and make every playoff shot count. Remember, that's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook. Titans fans, let's continue today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast. One more mock draft Monday for mock draft season. Wanted to take a look at some of these way too early 2025 NFL mock drafts. And more important than the mock drafts, it's just the disrespect that the Tennessee Titans and Will Levis are getting right now. It's absolutely absurd. You know, I try to not get so mad about some of these things, but it's just hard. It's hard not to. I'll talk about it at the end of the show. But now we need to talk about some of these picks that do make sense. And what it allows us to do is not to be so focused on the player and their profile and their skill set. I really want to have this conversation about the needs that the Titans are going to be facing next year, no matter what happens going forward. So we're going to talk about that. Before I do, thank you for making the Locked On Titans podcast your first to listen each and every day. So want to look at this mock draft from Jordan Reed on ESPN. Again, way too early, 2025 NFL mock draft. And like Dane Brugler, Jordan Reed went off the betting odds off ESPN Bet. So it's not like he's projecting where these teams are going to finish, but he had the Titans having the number 4 pick in the NFL draft. Number 4. Higher pick than they had last year. Okay. But he had the Titans trading down with the Raiders. So, or the Titans had the 5th pick. My mistake, the 5th pick. And the Titans trade down with the Raiders from 5 to 10 because the Raiders come up to get a quarterback. And the Titans take Luther Burden, the 3rd wide receiver out of Missouri. And Jordan Reed says, quote, with DeAndre Hopkins entering the final year of his contract, finding a young receiver to play opposite Calvin Ridley makes sense. Burden is an explosive tackle breaker. He forced 32 missed tackles, which was 5th most among all FBS receivers last year, and is 710 yards after the catch out of the 1,212 total receiving yards, ranked 3rd. So Luther Burden, wide receiver out of Missouri. This makes sense. Now, if the Titans are drafting 10th or 5th and trading back, I mean, I got my own beef with that we'll talk about here in a second, but Luther Burden is the type of player that the Titans will need. The Titans desperately will need wide receiver next year. DeAndre Hopkins is going to be 32 years old this year, and he's in the last year of his contract. Do you really want to give a contract extension to a 33-year-old wide receiver? Is that what we want to do when we just gave a big-time contract to Calvin Ridley, who's going to be 29 soon, or is 29 right now? No matter what, the Titans desperately will need a number 1 young receiver to grow with Will Levis. That's why I was okay with taking Malik Neighbors this year. That's why I was okay with taking Rome Odunze this year. Because while they may have Ridley and Hopkins, you can't count on Treylon Burks. You can't count on Kyle Phillips to be anything. Why would we do that? So the Titans will need a top-flight, top-tier drafted wide receiver ASAP, like immediately. They're going to need that next year. If they didn't do it this year, which they didn't really do anything with it this year, then they're desperately going to need it next year. Like, no question about it. So I love the pick of Luther Burden, but more important than Luther Burden as a player, who's excellent, is just the fact that the Titans will have a desperate need at wide receiver next year. The next way too early mock draft that I want to look at here comes from Pro Football Focus. All right. And it was done by Max Chadwick and Dalton Wasserman. But they have the Titans here with the 4th pick. Okay. And it doesn't say in here whether this is their, based on Super Bowl odds. That's everybody's cop-out, right? They get to go off the Super Bowl odds. And, of course, the Titans are picking 4th. And they take Will Johnson, cornerback out of Michigan. Now, this one is tougher for me. I'm not going to be opposed to the Titans taking a freak cornerback if there's one available. I'm glad the Titans didn't do that this year with like Tyrion Arnold or Quinyon Mitchell. I think those are good players, but I don't know if they're good enough to take cornerback 4. You know what I mean right there? But next year, after we get to see a year of Cheeto, after we get to see a year of L'Jarius Sneed, maybe it'll make more sense. Here, PFF says, quote, Tennessee selects the top cornerback in the draft, Michigan's Will Johnson. Johnson has been incredible in Ann Arbor, shutting down some of the best receivers in the country. He has earned a fantastic 86.3 single coverage grade over the last 2 years. All right, look, like, I understand you can never have that, never have too many cornerbacks, but for me, I mean, Kelvin Banks, the offensive tackle out of Texas, offensive tackle is still a way bigger need. And if the Titans don't do anything with that this year, which they're kind of out of good ways to solve that problem, you're going to have to replace one of those offensive tackles. You know, whether they put Latham at right, left, doesn't matter. You're going to need another one. So I would probably rather go with Kelvin Banks out of Texas than Will Johnson. You look at Luther Burden still being on the board here. I mean, that makes it tough for me. Harold Perkins, even. I'm not a big linebacker guy, but like, I just have a tough time going cornerback there. I know that the Titans need a number one lockdown corner, but they literally just gave up a draft pick. So that means that next year, their third round pick will be for L'Jarius Sneed, and their first round pick will be on Will Johnson. You know, I'm not hating on Will Johnson as a player, but man, they're just, Deion Walker, defensive lineman, Kelvin Banks. Again, I mentioned Luther Burden. Just tough. It's just tough for me to accept going cornerback right there. So it will be a need, but I don't know. I guess it depends on what happens. Here's one I do want to go over from NBC Sports that I do like. It's from Eric Froton. Titans picking fourth, again, Super Bowl odds. But they take James Pierce Jr., the edge out of Tennessee. Here's the blurb. Quote, a terror off the edge who charted 8.5 sacks with a team-leading 4.7% havoc rate and 14.5 tackles for loss. Pierce recorded the second highest PFF pass rush grade in the Power 5 and at 92.4 behind only UCLA edge Laiatu Latu, who was the first defender selected in 2024's NFL Draft. Pierce Jr. is crafty, versatile edge defender with all the physical tools to succeed and the pedigree to revitalize the Titans' pass rush. Tennessee fans, let me know down below how you feel about that. But more importantly than James Pierce is the need for edge. I didn't want to see the Titans take an edge rusher in this draft class this year, but at this point, I am fully on board with edge. Edge is going to be a screaming need next year. Now, Will Campbell, the offensive tackle from LSU, is on the board. I don't know if I could pass there. I don't know if I could pass on Will Campbell. Again, the Titans need another offensive tackle, and I am fully on board with them taking it. But here's what the real point is. Wide receiver, offensive tackle, edge, and heck, maybe even throw cornerback in there too, depending on what happens with Cheeto, But those are the four most important positions outside of quarterback. Wide receiver, offensive tackle, edge, cornerback. I mean, those are the four most important positions outside of quarterback. So the premium positions, there are going to be good players at premium positions. Now, here's the problem. I don't think the Titans are picking that high. And I think that these Super Bowl odds suck. Quite honestly. I think they're wrong. And look, I'm not going to tell you to go bet them because the odds of the Titans winning the Super Bowl, but there's just no way. There's no way in my mind the Titans are picking in the top 5 next year. And I'll explain why. Before I do, though, do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go, and I know what you're saying, flag on the play. You already talked about that, but there's just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with your friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock, and there's so much to get. Unique stickers to trade with your friends, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, hilarious emojis you can use to taunt your friends as well. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like Digging for Treasure and Robot Pachinko Machine. There's always new timed events to help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or even rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it now for free. on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. Titans fans, let's cap off today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast. One more mock draft Monday for this year. Of course, they'll be back next offseason. But looking at these mock drafts, man, again, the big thing that stands out to me is the absolute disrespect for Will Levis. And we talked about one where the Titans were picking a quarterback, but there are others out there as well. And, I just don't want to spend too much time on all these different mocks when they're all just saying the same things. But the disrespect for Will Levis is just out of control. Now, we talked about some positions that do make sense for the Titans with some players that I don't think the Titans will have access to. Because the Titans are not picking in the top 5 next year. And I don't care about Super Bowl odds, and I don't care where they come from, and all of this and that. It is absurd to think that the Titans are going to be worse this year than they were last year. It just does not make any sense. Before I explain why, thank you for making the Locked On Titans podcast your first listen each and every day. Remember, Monday through Friday, Tennessee Titans content all year round, always for free. Make sure you get subscribed, stay subscribed to your team every day. So you're telling me a team that added Lloyd Cushenberry, gets an improved Peter Skoronski, adds J.C. Latham, adds Bill Callahan, isn't going to have a better offensive line? A team that added Calvin Ridley, one of the better separators in the NFL. A team that added Tony Pollard to add more versatility and dynamicism out of the backfield. With one of the better quarterback gurus in the NFL now as their head coach. So Bill Callahan, his son, running the offense. With a ton of former players and experienced coaches. You're telling me that offense isn't going to be any better? Now, I get if you want to say the defense is going to be worse. All right, Titans had good defensive coaching. There were things that we didn't like, but overall, good defensive coaching. The Titans still have Jeffrey Simmons and Harold Landry. I know a lot of you guys really love the Tavondre Sweat pick, so they're adding a big run stopper who should be better than Tierra Tart up front. Linebacker got a little bit worse, losing Aziz. I don't think Kenneth Murray is as good as Aziz. I don't. Cedric Gray adding in. He's a rookie. Who knows? But going from Christian Fulton, Sean Murphy-Bunting to L'Jarius Sneed and Cheeto Awuzie, that's not a major improvement. I don't know. It looks like the Titans have one of the best cornerback groups in the entire NFL after having one of the worst groups last year. So, just as good on the pass rush, maybe a little less with losing Danico Autry. Fair enough. But hey, you guys love Tavondre Sweat, so a little bit worse on the pass rush. Way better pass coverage. Linebacker's a little step behind. I could say if you say the defense is a little behind. But look at the improvements on offense. It's hard for me to sit here and be like, the Titans won 6 games last year, and they added Bill Callahan and Brian Callahan and Denard Wilson as coaches, and they added Lloyd Cushenberry, and they added J.C. Latham, and they added Calvin Ridley, and they added Tony Pollard, and they added Cheeto, and they added L'Jarius Sneed. And that team is going to be worse than they were last year. With a 4th place schedule, that team's going to be worse. The math just is not mathing for me. And it's just frustrating. And again, I know that the Super Bowl odds and the way too early mock drafts and the national conversation about the Titans doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter to the on-field product, right? Wins, losses, none of that stuff is going to affect how many games the Titans win. But I don't care. It's just frustrating, man. And if you're a fan who doesn't just find it frustrating to have your team crapped on nationally all the time, I don't know what to tell you. I know you could say every time the Titans turn into favorites, they crap the bed. And But you get the number 1 seed and you lose in that embarrassing fashion. And that's why. And I'm not saying that it's not justified. I'm just saying it's annoying. Like at the end of the day, that's all the point is. It's just so annoying to see the Titans crapped on all the time, no matter what. All of the additions they made this offseason, how much better this roster got this offseason. And all these places think the Titans are going to be worse. Just like, doesn't make any sense to me at all. Second worst Super Bowl odds. We really think the Titans are going to be the second worst team in the NFL after all of the additions and the change? Like, I don't know. Man, it's just one of those things, reading through some of these way too early mock drafts, and I'm just like, man, screw this. Like, this is absurd. And y'all know, I'm not some, like, classic Titans homer who's going to get up here and tell you that they're going to win every game. Like, people get mad at me all season long because I don't have them going undefeated, Like, I try to be balanced here in my coverage of the team and, like, be honest. But, like, top 5 pick, man, just absolutely ridiculous. So, I'm going to talk about where I think the Titans are going to finish and their record and all that. Those conversations are going to be had here over the next few weeks. But let me know down below if you think the Titans are going to have a top 5 pick. Like, do you really think they're going to be that bad? Is there anybody out there who's a Titans fan who thinks they're going to be that bad this year? Like, it just blows my mind. It blows my mind. But with that being said, that is going to do it for me today, folks. As always, I am your host, Tyler Rowland, and this was Locked On Titans.